Hello and welcome to Behind the Bearcat. This is the podcast where the Northwest Missouri State University Career Services Office chats with Northwest faculty, staff, students, alumni, and friends to hear about their career journeys, how they got to where they are, and how they became Bearcats. I'm Career Services Assistant Director Travis Klein.
And I'm Hannah Christian, the Director of Career Services here at Northwest. And today's guest on our show is...
Hi, I'm Kaylin, LaMaster, and I am the Executive Assistant for the Vice President of Finance and Admin, as well as the Finance and Contract Systems Specialist.
That's a title and
I'm
a
glad
half.
we
I'm
did
gonna
not have to introduce
have
you.
to make a bigger title card for you with a title like that. That's quite the name. So thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it, especially on a Friday afternoon when we're being silly and doing 5 takes to get into it. So yes, welcome. So tell us with that incredible title, your business card's probably like 6 foot long. What do you actually do in that role or in those roles? Sounds like maybe a couple things here.
Yeah, so I actually just started this position last Tuesday, but I assist the Vice President of Finance and Administration here at Northwest, and that is Stacy Carrick. And along with that, I am the backup to the contract system here at Northwest, the Jagger system. And then I really do a lot of ins and outs as I'm finding out. But
yeah. All right. So since you're fairly new to this role, maybe you can, again, I can't help myself, got to go way back into the day. When you were young, like, what did you want to be when you were going to grow up?
That's a great question. Honestly, I wanted to be a professional athlete. That was probably my dream job.
What sport?
Basketball. But as I got older, I found out that I really liked math. I really liked numbers. And I took an accounting class, and I was like, "Ooh, okay. I really like doing things in the finance scope." And so that's what led me to get a finance degree.
Okay, so where are you from originally, and then how did you get to Northwest?
So I'm from Guilford, Missouri, which is about 30 minutes away from campus. So I pretty much grew up knowing all about Northwest. And that's why I decided to stay, because I wanted to stay here. And so that's why I chose Northwest, was just to stay close to home.
And did you know you wanted to do finance at that point? Like had you already figured that out, or you didn't figure that out till you got to Northwest?
No, I pretty much figured out I wanted to either do something in finance or accounting related. I'd say like my freshman year in high school, I took an accounting 1 class and I was like, okay, I really like doing this. And then once I got to Northwest, I was like, yeah, I like the finance degree. You get a more rounded degree, because I had accounting classes, I had different business classes and finance classes. So that's kind of what led me to it.
And you mentioned the contract system, Jagger. You've actually, even though you just started in that role, you've actually worked with Jagger for a good while because you were one of our PBL interns for the office doing that. So you want to kind of talk about maybe your experience with that and kind of what you did prior to this full-time role to kind of help them get that set up.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was first a student in the finance office, and then the opportunity to help with the Jagger system once it was purchased and really brought on campus, I guess you could say. The team who was on the initial process of that decided that they really needed an intern, and so through career services there was the option to do that, and I really thought it sounded like fun, so I decided to apply for it, and I got it, and I believe that was for a year. So I did that for a year, but I was involved in the implementation, so around campus, training people from all different departments, and I also helped on the backside of Jagger, trying to get the system to work the way we needed it to work for everybody here.
And can you kind of explain a little bit about what Jagger does and how it helps us out?
Yeah. So what's the best way to describe it? It basically, you're just taking your contract and it makes sure that we're following all of the policies that we have in place. And it goes through, certain contracts have different things in them. If it's an event contract, then it has to run through approvals for facilities to help with, the setup or the cleanup, um, approvals for, the department itself, just making sure everybody's in the know. And then it also helps get signatures on things, which prior to Jagger was a very difficult process where you had to email and try to track down a document occasionally. But I believe it's made things a lot easier, which was our goal, was to make it a lot easier for departments themselves to put the contracts in, because before we just had basically just a compository, or that was where we kept all the contracts, and not necessarily all of them were the whole contracts that we had. So this has really eliminated the loss of those contracts, or just making sure we're following all of our policies.
We kind of took away the Wild West of contracts. That's kind of what it was before. It was
and
a
I can tell you, as a
Wild
user,
West.
it has made the process easier, if nothing else than just for the signatures. Because before, you had a piece of paper you were walking around trying to get people to sign, or you were emailing a PDF to people hoping they would sign it. Now the system kind of is a central place, and we all know we got to go there, and just that is worth it for that. I'm interested, you mentioned in that first PBL internship you were training staff. So how intimidating was that as a student to have to go in front of these people who, some of them worked at Northwest for 30 years, and tell them, this is how you need to change what you do, and you need to do it this way? Was that, how was that as a student? What was that like?
It was definitely different at first. And I am not a public speaker at all. And so I was very nervous to be in on those meetings. I will say I had two great mentors in that process, who they took on most of the meeting. And then as I became more comfortable, I would chip in and say certain things, mostly about the system itself, not necessarily about, contract policy or anything like that. But it definitely helped me become more comfortable in those situations. And as I've gotten, I guess, more used to it, I've definitely gotten better at it, enough to do this podcast. So
right, yeah, hey, it's one step at a time. So those PBL internships, I don't know if we've talked about it on the podcast before, Hannah, or not, but the idea of those, PBL is a term we love at Northwest, and we use it. I'm sure we've said it on here before, but it's profession-based learning. And the idea with these podcasts is, basically, it's
the PBL
offices,
internships?
PBL intern, yeah. What did I say? Did I say a podcast?
You said podcasts.
I've got podcasts on the brain.
It's okay.
So a podcast could be one of them, but you have a project basically that you're doing. So doing the Jagger system, like, they knew they needed help with it. They didn't necessarily have the resources to get a full-time staff member to do it. So they applied for an internship where they have a student who wants to work on that project, and it worked out really well. So that's kind of the idea of them. And then they're funded through the Career Services Office to get our students more experience. So, and that wasn't the only one you had. You were actually a double PBL intern, right? So what was the other experience that you had?
So the other one was working with university grants, which it was a little bit shorter. It was only for a semester.
Because you graduated, right?
Correct, because I graduated.
We would have kept you a full year, but you felt like you had to be done.
Yeah. But yeah, that dealt with grants, and really that was just trying to straighten out our process and make sure that it was I guess a more better flowing process than it was before, because that was and I mean, there was some difficulties with that because every grant was different. And that was definitely the biggest challenge, was that every single grant seemed to be different. Every granting agency wanted something different. But I was really on the excuse me, the back end of that process. I really just paid attention to more of, okay, this is what we need at first, and then making sure, all the dollars are spent in the right areas, in which I had to do monthly tracking of that. Um, and then just making sure, either we either got paid for it, or I shouldn't say paid for it, we either received funds at first or we had to apply to receive funds after. So just making sure that from start to finish that we completed those. But there was that was definitely less time. I definitely had I definitely learned some things from that one as well. But I would say from the Jagger one, I had a little more experience because it was a year long.
Mm-hmm.
Can you go back? I want to go back, and you said that you started out as just an employee in the finance office. Can you tell me how, as a student, you sought out employment? How were you successful in terms of finding out what job you wanted to do on campus and then kind of applying and interviewing, etc., at the very
Yeah.
beginning?
So going all the way back to my freshman year in college, that's when my second semester, I applied actually. I was looking for a job on campus because I had had one off campus and it just wasn't really working with my schedule. I was working like 30 plus hours and trying to be a full-time student and it was just not working. So I was like, I'll get a job on campus. I knew some people who had a job and they were like, yeah, it works pretty good with my schedule. And so I applied for a position in student account services. And that is the first position I actually held on campus, was there. And then I stayed there for
What do you do in student account services?
so that
What fun
position.
things do you do
Oh
in student
yes.
account services?
So that position, I did a lot of calling of students who were past due on their bills, or just fielded questions from them too. They would call in, ask certain things about their bills. It is very customer service oriented, basically, where we would answer questions about their accounts, call them, say, "Hey, what's your plan for this?" Um, but that was the bulk of that position. And I also, while being in that, I did a little bit of, I helped the cashiering side because they're two separate kind of departments, but they're all in one location. And in that job, I took payments. So they all came together. But I stayed in that position for almost a year. And then the position in the finance office, the student position opened up. And I did all kinds of things in that position. I helped with the Jagger things before and after the internship, and helped with the grants. And we also helped with the university purchasing cards. And there's other probably things that I'm missing, but there's just a lot of different things we do in that position. And I'm sure my students now would tell you that they do all kinds of miscellaneous things.
What was that transition like going from student employee and intern to now full-time staff member? I would have, and staying in the same area. A lot of times we'll hear people will work somewhere on campus and they'll get a full-time job somewhere else, but you're in the same area basically. So
Yeah.
you're working with a lot of the same people, which is nice, but the role is different. So what's that transition been like?
Yeah, so it was a little interesting just because I actually went into a temporary role after I graduated. And then I was actually at purchasing for about 3 months. I started there in May, and then at the end of August, or beginning of September, I came over here. So it was a little bit of an adjustment, definitely. But it was great to be in the area I was already experienced in and to know everybody. And definitely transitioning to this new job has been great because I still know everybody around here and I've, had the experience. It is a little challenging, definitely, switching from the student side to the employee side, just because, well, now I'm in charge of the student employees, and that's definitely different. But so far it's been good, and it is definitely different.
As far as working on campus goes, maybe one of the things that I love asking about when it's full-time, student employment over to full-time employment are like, can you give me maybe just 2 or 3 things that like maybe are different about working full-time than about being a part-time student employee? Because we've experienced this in our office where we've had people who've been, I mean, even student employees working 20 hours a week. And then they were surprised, like, oh, I didn't realize that you guys were spending this much time doing this on the backside. Do you have any of those?
Um, Sometimes. I know, um, like for certain projects, like if we give them a portion of it, just for us to get that little portion back to do our whole of a thing, sometimes that happens. Um, I think the biggest difference I've experienced is only get 20 hours when you're a student, and sometimes you won't be able to finish whatever you're working on. And now that I'm at 40 hours, you got a lot more time, you get a lot more things done. So that's definitely been a good change because now I get things done and
You're
don't feel
tearing
like I
through
have to
those
rush.
projects. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, but I don't know if there's really that was one of the biggest things I myself noticed. And more responsibilities, obviously. That's been a change. Um, but yeah, I would definitely say just having, that small amount of time compared to now you have as much time as you need to take to get something done.
Do you feel like a burden lifted after you don't have to take classes and also work at the same time? I think I remember that being like, oh, hallelujah. I don't have to like change my class schedule every semester.
Yes, yes, that's been awesome. I've almost in December, I'll be out for a year. So I didn't know what to do with my time at first. I was like, what do I do now? All I do is just work. I don't have to take classes. So yes, it was definitely a burden lifted off my shoulders. I was excited to be done with classes. Now I have thought about getting my master's, but we'll see.
No
I would
rush.
recommend
No need
doing
to
that as
rush.
soon as possible.
Oh,
As someone
wait,
who
we have
waited 10
alt.
years, I waited 20 years between my undergrad and graduate, and the longer it is, the harder it gets. So you don't do it immediately, but don't wait 20 years. So, all right, excellent. So had to get up briefly because we were having some construction in the office, so I might have missed this. But usually, when we talk to students who have made the transition, after graduation, we want advice for other students, maybe tips and tricks. Now that you supervise student employees, maybe it's things that you would like to see when people apply for your job. What advice do you have for folks who maybe are where you were a couple years ago, where they're a student looking for those opportunities?
Yeah, I think the biggest advice I can give someone is just to be take every chance that you have. I mean, every opportunity you're given, go for it. There was a lot of opportunities I was given, especially the internship, and that has been the biggest probably experience of my professional career. When I interview, really for the last couple of jobs that I've had, that's been where I've drawn my most of my experience from is that. So I would just say take on any opportunities you're given, go for it.
That's solid advice for anybody, let alone students, full-time employees, all of us, I think. Absolutely.
All right. Well, awesome. Thank you for being a guest on the show. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
And definitely you are one of our PBL intern success stories. So when I talk to folks about the PBL intern program and kind of what it's for, I mean, I really think your story really kind of illustrates the idea of it, of getting students that professional experience that then leads them into their job. And that's exactly what happened with you. So we're so excited to have you at Northwest as a full-time employee. And, again, thank you for being on the podcast. We really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it as well.
All right. Well, that will do it from the episode of Behind the Bearcat, and we will talk to you next time. Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, be sure to give us a thumbs up below. That helps out. Also, if you've not done so yet, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. Also, we'd love to connect with you on social media. You can find Behind the Bearcat on Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Plus, the audio podcast comes out on Fridays on all the major podcast platforms. Thanks again for watching Behind the Bearcat, and as always, we'll talk to you next time.